Hello, everybody, and welcome to another episode of It's Paranormal Unexplained. I'm your host, Nick, my co host, Jason.
What up, everybody?
Well, this weekend we're going to be talking about time travel since this is the topic Jason picked.
Ooh, it is. I did pick this. Nick's recently turned me on to Doctor Who, so time travel seemed appropriate.
You're welcome for that. So I will
But
be handing it over to Jason. Take it
all
away.
right, everybody. So as Nick said, we're doing time travel. So grab your TARDISes and your DeLoreans and let's get into this shit. So Nick, what do you think we should start off with? Do you think we should start off with a man that traveled through time to rig the stock market? Or do you think we should travel with some heroes through time? Or do you think we should deal with a time traveler that's actually here right now?
Mm, how about we go with the one that's time traveled in here right now?
All right. We're going with this guy. His name is Noah. That is the only name he gives. He just goes by Noah, which they say is not his real name. They have distorted his voice and given a false name because he does not want his real name known. Because if his real name was known, assassins would knock him off.
All right.
So, what Noah claims is that he worked for a time traveling organization that kind of keeps, I guess, time in check. They just make sure everything goes right and nothing
Nobody's.
falls out of place because I guess time travel is possible now.
Mhm.
So, I guess they're like kind of like time cops, I guess. Van Damme, eat your heart out. But so Noah, which by the way doesn't even look anything like Van Damme. If you look up this picture, it's from the sun, and I couldn't get a picture of him because everything's like blurry. That's why I didn't give Nick one.
Mhm.
But in just the picture, he just looks like a normal kid, probably in his early 20s. He's like a little hipster kid. But so Noah would go on to say he works for this top secret government research facility that deals with cyber, like time traveling anomalies, criminals, blah, 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 and sometimes just research. And it's so secret that they have to like start recruiting you out of middle school.
Middle school?
Yeah, middle school. They
Oh
pick you
shit.
up out of middle school, get some full on way that they convince your parents, I guess, to release you to them, and you start training with this bureau,
Hmm.
and took on a career as a time traveler based in the year of 2030.
Okay.
He would go on to say that people in high places, such as Elon Musk and other people, would be my primary minds behind coming up with this technology.
Okay.
And he says that even while he is stuck here, and when this article was written, it was back in 2019, so this isn't that long ago.
Right. Right.
He would go on to sit there and say that he even has family here now, but they wouldn't recognize him, and him himself is here now, and he's like in the what is that? What was that?
What?
I just heard somebody yelling about a car on my side. But okay, sorry, I don't know what that was on my side, guys. Sorry about that. But so I guess he says that himself is still here too, back in middle school.
Okay.
So he would go on to do. I'm still hearing that damn thing. What is that?
I don't even know. There's
I,
nothing.
I I'm hearing something. I don't know what that is. Oh, I see what it is. It's that video like 10 minutes ago. I tried to load for you. It finally kicked on, and it's some chick screaming about 2021.
Oh, good God.
Okay, so sorry about that, guys. Now we figured that out. I stopped it. All right, so it won't throw me off my story anymore. All right, so back to Noah. Well, apparently he at this time when he arrived back here, he would have been in middle school. So I guess they're about to pull him out of school any time now.
Mm-hmm.
But he even says he is proof that he is who he says he is.
Okay.
Which this is the part that gets me is that they did take an X-ray of his hand and find a chip in there that he said was there.
Right.
And during this chip, they removed it from his hand, analyzed it. Now, all the components and compounds that made up this thing were stuff that's found here on Earth, so it is earthbound.
Okay.
But the way it's made and the technology behind it is way too advanced for this time.
Right.
So they saying there's some possibility and truth behind it. And they even went on for later in that year and gave Noah a lie detector test, which he passed. And they said they would go on to test him 22 different times, and all times he came back that he passed.
Okay.
It says he would go on to sit there and say that he came back to fix a problem that had happened in the time stream in 2019 and failed to do so. Henceforth, he was fired from the Time Bureau and just left in 2019. And so now he says that since he's stuck here and didn't complete his job, no, it wasn't 2019 that he tried to complete his job and got fired. That was 2017 that he got fired. It's
All right.
2019 at the time that they started doing the interview. Sorry about that.
That's all right.
But after doing this, he would go on to sit there and say that since he's stuck here now, he is just like everybody else. He has a normal job, 9 to 5,
Mm-hmm.
and he's just trying to get by as everybody else because the code to their bureau is you can no longer be pulled back after you're fired
Well,
because you're a
that's
liability at that point.
well, that's the thing. You think if they were the liability, they pull him back into the future and then fire him, so that way he couldn't stay back to where he was.
Yeah, that's another thing I thought was kind of skeptical about it. But a lot of people have gone on to believe that he had pulled a lot of his inspiration from Back to the Future
Right.
because the way he would go on to explain that if I touch my previous self and
Yeah. If he got in
all this
contact
other
with his previous
things.
self. Yeah.
Yeah, because he said that's the whole reason he hasn't tried to contact his parents or anybody since now he's stuck here is because, for one, they wouldn't recognize who he was. And two, if he got around his 8 year old, like his 8 or 9 year old self, however old he is, middle school, whatever he was,
Yeah.
if he was to get around him, he would, something bad would happen. He says a paradox would happen by his quote.
It would be like the grandfather time paradox, basically.
Yeah, I mean, we've all seen Time Cop, how that ends.
Yeah.
But so that's the story of Noah. He
Interesting.
believes that he's a time traveler and just got stuck here.
Which is a shitty way to get fired. So.
It definitely is. That is not the way that I would want to go out.
No. No.
But all right, so from there, we'll take you since I mentioned Doctor Who earlier, and we'll give you one that, in my belief, I think this guy has watched too much Doctor Who, and that this is where this story came from. But it's another famous time traveling story. It's called The Legend of Billy Meyer. Now, Billy Meyer is a Swiss-born native,
Mm-hmm.
and as the legend would go about it, is that Billy was abducted by a very friendly and intelligent alien that they called himself the Prajar, which I don't know what that means. It's just what he was called. But the Prajar would then proceed to take him on a journey through time and space. So this would all take place back in 1970. Meyer claimed that time traveling aliens showed up to his bedside one day and were just like, "Hey, we're friendly. You seem cool. Want to go see some dinosaurs? And Billy was like, boy, do I. And he hopped on there and they went and saw some dinosaurs. But that's not where Billy's fun ended. Billy then goes on to claim that the alien then proceeded to take him to the ancient surface of Mars, where he met an
Okay.
ancient civilization of Martians that no longer exist in our time, called the Jamanuels, which the last descendant of the Jamanuels was Jesus.
Okay.
So,
That's a little much.
but the problem is with this is that he would go on to do many TV shows and a bunch of books about this, and even says that he has photographic evidence. Now, he did present the evidence on one television show at one point, but it was nothing but a blurry photo.
Mm-hmm.
And when asked why the picture was blurry, he'd go on to sit there and say that, oh, it's because time, if I take something, a picture of something in time, because time's open to change since I'm a time traveler, that the picture will come out blurry because it's open, it's subject to change.
Right.
Well, I would think that's the case if, like, something was in the future and I was in the past.
The picture would
But
no longer be blurry.
yeah, but like this supposedly this thing took him to like ancient Mars in the 1970s. So since it was in the past, I don't see why the picture would have been blurry. Shouldn't it still be there?
Yeah. By the way you're describing it, yeah, the picture should have taken form and shouldn't be blurry at all.
Oh yeah. And I mean, see, the thing, I went through a lot of these things, and since you've introduced me to Doctor Who, and I've about watched the whole series, I think a lot of these people that do come up with these long tales of time travel are people that are very highly addicted to the time travel movies and
Yeah.
TV shows. Like, even one went on to sit there and say that I read this and it just came to my head right off the top of my head. The first Matt Smith episode of him being Doctor Who, because the guy goes on to sit there and say that he was at the Olympics in 2004
Yeah.
and this time traveling, like, hostile alien tried to attack him and hurt people there, and some government guy showed up and fought the thing off, and the creature would go by the name Time Traveler Zero.
Okay.
Well, then that just went back to the whole Prisoner Zero thing to
Yeah.
Doctor Who for me.
Yeah.
They just, instead of calling him Prisoner, they just said Time Traveler Zero.
Yeah. Yeah.
So that one was kind of ridiculous to me.
Oh yeah, that's absurd.
And if something did show up in 2004 and was very hostile, trying to hurt people at the Olympics,
Yeah, that would
you'd
be.
think that had been all over the news.
Yeah, that would be huge.
Yeah. So that was that little other little story I heard there. Just thought you'd get a kick out of that one for the Doctor Who thing of it.
Well, yeah, I mean it's it definitely ties in with Doctor Who. So
Oh
Doctor
yeah,
Who or
definitely.
Rick and Morty, one of the two. But
It goes with something.
well, I mean, you have
But
somebody that just
Does Rick and Morty even time travel though?
no, that's more interdimensional. But just somebody appearing out of nowhere, that's just something like Rick would do. Just pop in out of nowhere and say, "Hey, guess
Yeah,
where
yeah.
we're going?"
It's you and me. It's you and me, Nick. It's Nick and Morty forever. Just Nick and Morty taking on the universe times 1,000. www.nickandmorty.com. But all right, let's hop into the man, the myth, the legend of Rudolph Fentz. Now,
Okay.
this would go on to be one of the craziest little incidences that was ever found and ever seen. Because this, to me, is probably the most significant piece of anything I've ever seen. But the time traveler could never tell a story
Hmm.
because he died.
Okay.
And he died the minute he got here, pretty much. So back in the 1950s, the story goes, this is in some newspapers and other things I would come to find out,
Right.
but as the story goes, in the 1950s, all of a sudden, just in the middle of the road in New York City, a man appeared with mutton chops, sideburns, Victorian air, duds, and all kinds of that kind of dressing.
Yeah.
Just appeared in the middle of downtown Times Square.
Okay.
And he looked panicked and shocked and just totally out of place of where he was. He didn't even expect this.
Right.
And in his panic, he took off running and was immediately hit by a car and killed.
Okay.
Now, police and body and examiners would come and haul him away pretty rapidly because of the hysteria that was going on about this. Because by all witness accounts, this man just virtually appeared out of nowhere.
Right.
And so they took him away, and after going through his body and finding and looking for evidence, they would find 19th century money as well as documents that were dated and signed by a what is it? What are they? The notary.
Okay.
Signed and notarized that dated at 1876, and even at a point that a man said that he could have taken a lighter for a few seconds to the piece of paper and smeared the ink, it was still so fresh.
Oh wow.
Now, after doing microscopic analyzations on this thing years later, after all this happened, because they kept some of the evidence because of this bizarre case, scientists later, years and years back, now in 2009, when they did the test on the paper, found it to be identical, the same strand, meaning DNA strand, from the tree that they used to carve it.
Yeah.
Out of the same type of paper that was used in 1876.
Oh wow.
Meaning that this tree belonged to the same group of trees that was cut down and used for this paper.
Yeah.
So, and then they found coins that looked like they were freshly minted coins from that time. And all his clothes seemed in really good shape, but all the manufacturing dates on the clothes were of the 1800s.
Oh wow.
Now, they would go on to look through the documents and do a lot of more research into him, and months later, they they knew his name, and his name was Rudolph Fentz.
Right.
And they would later track down a Mrs. Rudolph Fentz that was tracked down to believe the widow of Rudolph Fentz Jr. This was the mysterious dead man's son.
Okay.
And as she told the story, her husband would say it over and over again that him and his father were in their field working, and he said he heard like a bolt of lightning strike behind him. When he turned around, his father was gone, and he was never seen again.
Huh.
And then it wasn't until they went to this document, found the thing, found a Rudolph Jr., and then traced that he had a living widow. Went and asked him, said, "Do you recognize the man in this photo?" She said, "Yes, it looks like my husband's dad, but that was years ago." And then she'd go on to tell the story, and that would be the legend of Rudolph Fentz. Now, later they would sit there and say that they would come out and say that this story was not an actual real thing that happened. They would say it was it was inspired by a short story by Jack Feeney, the same man that wrote The Invasion of the Body Snatchers and Time Again.
Okay.
But the problem with that theory is that Rudolph Fentz appeared in downtown New York City in 1950. Mr. Finney wouldn't write that short story that they said inspired this until 1952. So it sounds like to me this event
Is
inspired that short story.
yeah, yeah, that's what it sounds like.
So I don't think it's the other way around. I think the event inspired it. So that's
Yeah,
one of the ones that gives me a little bit of promise here because of just all that. I mean, the documents, the
yeah.
coins, the way the historians even said that this should be over 100 years old,
Mm-hmm.
and it looks like it was just freshly made.
Yeah, yeah.
Things like that. But that will be the story of Rudolph Pence.
Okay.
What do you think?
Well, given the story that you told me and all the evidence that basically that they had on the person's body, yeah, that's
You
if
think that boy's dad was struck by a bolt of lightning and transported?
I think something happened. I don't think he was struck by a bolt of lightning and transported. I don't know
Aliens?
exactly. I don't know. I'm not saying like exactly what happened, but apparently the boy's father went somewhere.
I just don't think back in the 1800s that we would have had that technology to transport somebody.
No, and obviously a bolt of lightning alone isn't just going to transport somebody.
So to me, that has to be something otherworldly at that time to have transported somebody like that.
Yeah.
What if it was just like an alien just like pulling a fucking prank and all of a sudden he's like, watch, I'm going to put this dude over into like, you know, 1970. And he's like, bam. And then the dude gets hit by a car and the alien's like, oh, that went wrong real quick.
It's possible. It's possible.
I was not expecting him to panic and run like that. Oh man, but
Okay.
here's what I picked out just for you, Nick.
Oh,
Let's
good.
let's call it the Philadelphia experiment. Nick's a big fan of the Philadelphia experiment, not because he uses it all the time, but just because it's a well-known thing that he likes to reference because it's one of the few things that almost anybody who's interested in the paranormal,
Hmm.
time travel, or anything has a recollection of what the Philadelphia experiment is.
Exactly.
But what a lot of people don't know about the Philadelphia experiment, what they believe the Philadelphia experiment is, was teleportation.
Hmm.
What people don't realize about the Philadelphia experiment, it was one of the only government successful time travel experiments. Now, this goes back into the early 1940s. The USS Eldridge was getting ready to embark on an experimental mission called
Hmm.
the Philadelphia experiment. Several people that were there as witnesses, politicians, funders, and a bunch of native crewmen, were there to witness the events and help carry it out.
Right.
So, in all counts, there was 326 sailors on deck.
Okay.
There were 27 official officers ranking from four-star generals all the way to captains. And there were several high-ranking politicians that set aboard another aircraft carrier a couple of miles from the USS Eldridge.
Okay.
Now, according to all their statements given, and this is like I said, by all counts, not a single story varied.
Right.
By all counts, and now if you count up how many people I just said, that's about 400 accounts that you're about to hear say the exact same thing, that they witnessed the USS Eldridge turn invisible, disappear, and the crew of the Eldridge would go on to say that they disappeared, reappeared, and then that was it, and then disappeared again and reappeared.
Hmm.
They would go from Philadelphia to, and right off the shore of Philadelphia, to Norfolk, Virginia, and back again, all within 30 seconds. Now, people started to be like, this is a success, it teleported, but several of the crew said they heard scientists on board and people say this didn't go exactly as planned.
Hmm.
Nobody knew what they were talking about until scientists revealed later on that when they checked the clocks on the USS Eldridge versus the universal clocks that they use in Switzerland,
Mm-hmm.
that which those two were synchronized up to each other, that the USS Eldridge actually went back 10 seconds. So 10 seconds of its time, it traveled backwards. It lost somewhere.
Mm-hmm.
Nobody says they experienced anything different. They said if they did travel back in time, they don't know and didn't feel it.
Right.
They said they know that they went from one place to another, but none of them said that they saw signs of time travel. The only thing that gives the time travel off here was the universally synced clocks that were off by 10 seconds.
Okay.
And that would be the Philadelphia experiment. It would go on to make several, inspire several films, a lot of books,
Mm-hmm.
and is one of the most talked about paranormal events in history still today.
Yes, it is.
So there's the Philadelphia experiment. Don't have to ask you what you think. I know you. I know you're a firm believer in that one,
Oh yeah.
and I am. I am too. That is that. I mean, you can't deny it. There's government documentation. There's
Right.
everything that says it happened.
Right. Something happened. We don't know what it was that happened.
Well,
That's the
according to this testimony, that's what happened.
well. The thing is, they still have a bunch of stuff that's still locked away that they're not releasing. That's the
Yeah.
whole entire. That's what I'm saying. You
Yeah.
know, I mean, you have people saying that's what
Well, I
happened,
know what
but
you. I know what you're saying. We don't know what they used to do this. We don't know
exactly.
how they did this. We just know that whatever they used and however they did it, that was the result.
Yeah, yeah. They weren't going for time travel whatsoever. They were just going for.
No,
They were going
they
for
were going.
cloaking.
Yeah. I mean, okay. If any of y'all have ever played Command and Conquer Red Alert, a prime example to what they were going for was like the chronosphere,
Mm-hmm.
like literally a pretty much a teleportation device where you could go from one place to the other in just seconds compared to where it would take you days to travel.
Yeah.
That I mean, and this was kind of like working up. I guess they were trying to use it as if we had to get into Russia quick and do our thing. This was how we were going to do it.
Mm.
So, but I guess nothing ever came of that.
No, no, because that was the whole entire Philadelphia experiment happened like right around the beginning of World War II, like right around
Right,
that time. So we weren't even in like in Europe yet. So that would think that was
no,
before D-Day.
right,
So
no,
yeah, they were
but
trying to like develop something so that way our ships weren't getting destroyed by German U-boats.
yeah, that's where it originally the Philadelphia experiment originally started. Now,
Yeah,
yeah, in the early 1940s.
yeah.
So they would, but it says they would go on to keep trying to work with the Philadelphia experiment all the way into the 1960s.
Mm-hmm.
But you don't hear anything of it again after the 60s either. I guess they got what they wanted, or they just deemed it as a failure after that point.
That's
Because
goes either.
I mean, it just goes dead. The legend of it just goes dead.
Yeah, yeah. Like that's the other. That's one of the other things. You don't know if they're continuing the experiment or not. That's something
Yeah.
that's sealed away that we'll probably never know for
Yeah,
years.
and the last thing I have here about it being anywhere is 1963, and it's just a U.S. politician referencing the Philadelphia experiment. And a lot of people called this politician a quack, too, by the way.
Mm-hmm.
But I'm just not trying to give out names. I don't want people going all political, being like Republican, Democrat, whatever they
Yeah,
want to do. But
yeah.
this politician go on to sit there and say that he knows the Philadelphia experiment existed and that we have hid things from the American people, and at this time we shall shed light to the American people.
Huh.
And then that was something he said in a private quote, and then months later he would go on to sit there and give a whole quote in a national press conference where he would say that The United States government is hiding something from their people, and before his time is done in office, he will reveal it to the people.
Mm-hmm.
3 weeks later, he was shot.
Yeah, we already know who that is. that,
Yeah.
that was painfully obvious before he even got to that point.
So that man was John F. Kennedy.
Yeah.
But John F. Kennedy was also no stranger to the point that he believed in a lot of the paranormal that he believed the government withheld.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's
So,
most people think that the reason why he was assassinated because he was going to be trying to come forward with all of this. Like, there's multiple.
aliens, time travel, all that.
Yeah, he was supposed to be releasing information on like top secret government things that were happening behind the scenes that nobody was supposed to know about, and that's people believe that's the reason why he was assassinated. Well,
Yeah,
one
it's
of the
kind
reasons.
of like that line from Independence Day, like where Jeff Goldblum's dad's like sitting there, and the president's like, "How did y'all pay for all this?" And then he just looks at, he's like, "Do you really think they spend $250 million on a gold toilet and $250,000 on a hammer?"
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, so, but government's always going to hide what they can from you
Oh
if they
yeah,
can.
yeah, yeah. That's without a doubt.
And sometimes you can't blame them because in the game of poker, you don't want to play your cards too far from the chest.
Yeah, right, right.
So, but okay, we're going to move on to a kind of a quirky one here. Now, I'm going to call this one the Biff. And for all you that know, that is a Back to the Future reference. All right, so this story goes on to about the man named Andrew Carlson. Apparently, in 2002, he wasn't a well-known investor. He literally just became like an overnight success. He literally claims that he walked into a pay cash day loan place, acquired a 800 cash advance loan, and proceeded to invest it into high-risk stock markets. And within 3 weeks, earning him $350 million. Carlson would go on from there to be arrested by federal agents because the U.S. government doesn't like it when you pay $800 and make $350 million.
Oh, right, right.
So they want to know why. So they wanted to see if he had insider trades and everything else. And upon arresting him, Carlson came up with this explanation. He would go on to sit there and confess to several detectives and agents that he was a time traveler from the year 2256 and that he had downloaded the stock market exchange and high risk stocks and proceeded to come back to the year of 2002 when those stocks were going through
Mm-hmm.
and make his money. And his plan was to leave the 350 million into a like what
Savings
is it? Like a
trust fund.
interest,
Yeah.
yeah, into an interest trust loan, and he'd put it in the bank, and then he would travel back to 2256, and the interest he would make in that would make him almost a quadrillionaire or whatever that thing is called. It's like real, you'd be the richest man in the world.
Yeah.
Like saving interest of $350 million for 256 years.
Yeah. Yeah. That's a little
Yeah,
much.
yeah, it's a little much. That's like if you had stocks in the very first railroad company ever made and they were still running today.
Yeah.
That's the thing. But sadly, no of the agents believed his story, and Carlson would end up going to prison for 22 years for embezzlement and insider trading. And this story came from the Weekly World News.
Okay.
So, what do you think? You think a guy pulled a Biff?
Oh God, he's full of shit. He didn't
You
pull.
think he was just an insider trader trying to save his ass?
Yeah, yeah, just like so they can probably like lock him up or like an insane asylum or something like that. He'd probably get a couple months and then out, and so he can just do whatever the hell he wanted. But yeah, I
Yeah,
don't believe that.
Yeah, they called him. They're like bullshit.
Yeah.
We've all seen Back to the Future too.
Yeah.
But all right, well that was the Biff. So let's move on to Robert Victor Goddard. He was a Royal Air Force commander back in 1935. Uh, he would go on to say that while doing a routine flyover mission, just as a kind of like, stretch your wings kind of flight,
Right.
just to make sure maintenance and all that was good on planes, because this was during the few year period between the end of World War One and the rise of World War Two. So it was during the peace times, and he was still flying over, and he was flying over the abandoned radar Air Force Station, Durham,
Right.
in Scotland. Well, when he was flying over Durham, he looked down and noticed that as it was, since it was decommissioned after World War One, it was
Right.
abandoned, just nothing there. It was in shambles. Then he says that at this moment, a storm started to gather in front of him, and it seemed to develop so quickly that he couldn't maneuver out of the path of the storm.
Okay.
So, proceeding to fly through the storm, he hit turbulence, and lightning strikes were all around him,
Hmm.
and he could barely control the plane. And then, as fast as the storm came, the storm left. He said when he gathered his bearings, he could look back down and he could see the radar Air Force Station Durham.
Hmm.
But now it was fully operational with engineers on the ground loading planes that he would come to later be known as Spitfires.
Okay.
Which, if for people who know that are history buffs and war buffs, Spitfires were the planes invented by the Americans, and later the blueprints were given to the British to fight the Germans in World War II.
Right.
So, at the time that Robert Goodard was on this miraculous flight, the Spitfire wouldn't have existed.
Right. Right.
So he looks down, sees engineers working on Spitfires, loading them with ammunition, and then even seeing his plane and sounding alarms as if they thought they were about to be
Attacked.
attacked. And upon the alarms going off, he re enters the storm again. And this time, when after all the turbulence and everything subsides, he comes out and he's at the back end of the Air Force Base, of the Radar Air Force Station, and
Hmm.
it is now abandoned again, the way he originally saw it.
Okay.
And people would go on to give him hell that, the Radar Air Force Station was, abandoned. They had closed it down. There are no, ideas in the future of ever reopening this station.
Hmm.
But it would only go from 1935, where he would see that, it would only be 4 years later that the Air Force Station would reopen up and start preparations for World War II.
Right.
So, which what people believe is that that's what he flew over and saw, was that station in full mode during World War II.
Hmm.
He'd even go on to write a book in the 1970s before his death called The Flight Towards Reality.
Huh.
Now, however strange the flight was, his flight recorders and all that can confirm that he was in one location and another within a few second period,
Huh.
because they didn't have the same kind of like black box we had, but they had
Yeah.
audio recorders.
Right.
And they said that in the audio recordings, they would hear disturbance. The whole microphone, all that would just cut off, would go dead,
Hmm.
and then come back to life a few seconds later. And then you could hear him sitting there saying, "No, this is not right." Da, 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 da. And then it goes dead again, comes back, and he's still just jammering on about how this can't be possible.
Yeah.
So it's not like we got video evidence or nothing. Really, got to tape back. This is 1935. Best,
Right. Right.
you're gonna have to take the guy at his word or just not believe it.
Hmm.
So, what do you think?
Uh, interesting story. I mean, it's. possible.
Think too many hours in the sky.
Well, considering the fact that they're in like the equipment basically had him at like a couple points, like you basically said, like he was at one point, then he was at another point, and he was at another point, and it basically confirms his story somewhat. I mean,
Yeah, but was he hallucinating? Was he?
I don't think he was hallucinating. I mean, that's a serious hallucination, especially to have like air raid sirens going off and stuff like that. I mean, that's one hell of a hallucination.
Right.
You know,
Oh, I got you. Yeah, you know,
it's
it's
out.
fun.
It's far. Go ahead.
It's crazy, but
Yeah.
I guess it's possible. I don't know. I don't know. I've never fallen through a storm like that. So
Well, I don't think anybody's fallen through the storm, to be perfectly
besides
honest.
him,
Well, yeah.
well, this will be the last one I got for us.
Okay.
But this one is one of the more famous ones, and I think I even gave you a picture to this one.
Yes, you did.
This is the called the famous time traveling hipster. Now, this one takes place back in the 1940s. Actually, the exact date for it was 1941. It was the opening of the South Fork Bridge in Gold Bridge, British Columbia. That's not two different bridges. The name of the town is Gold Bridge.
Mm-hmm.
The name of the bridge that's opening is the South Fork Bridge. So, but this all took place in British Columbia and Canada. Now, a newspaper at the time that was a famous newspaper in Canada was covering the event, and they snapped this photo.
Hold on a second. Let me
Now,
get that up. Go ahead. Keep going.
okay. Now, when they snapped this photo, almost everybody will immediately notice the one figure that's out of place.
Yeah. Like, as soon as he showed it to me, like, he stuck out like a sore thumb. Like,
But
it was, like,
yeah,
blatant.
I guess back then they didn't think too much about it because I guess time travel to them was insane.
Mm-hmm.
So if you even thought it, you probably didn't say anything
Yeah.
because back then you didn't say things like that and be taken seriously by nobody. But as you can see him, he's in the picture. He's sporting sunglasses and a T-shirt that has looks like some kind of logo of an M or something on it.
Yeah.
And he's wearing a textured sweater, and just it looks like something that somebody would have worn as a little hipster around this time and age.
Yeah. The only other thing he has is a camera in his hand, and it
Yeah, but
doesn't.
that camera even looks newer than the ones that they're using.
Yeah, it doesn't look like the normal, like the other camera the other guy
If you even
is
look right
holding
there
up.
by where his thumb's at, it
Yeah.
kind of even looks like a screen, kind of like the
Yeah.
digital cameras that we take with. But well, this photo would not really catch any attention until about 2008 2009 when it started circulating the internet.
Mm-hmm.
Now in 2010 it would make a full turn and become completely viral due to its popularity and how it went viral. People started to wonder about this photo, so a bunch of photograph experts got together and pulled the original negatives and compared it to the photo that we have here shown.
Mm-hmm.
And it says here that 32 scientists have examined the negative to the picture that is shown above. It says out of the 32 scientists, all 32 scientists come back and with the same conclusion that the photo is 100% genuine. Now, one other historian would go on to sit there and say that henceforth, even though this is a genuine photo, that almost all the clothing that he is wearing was stuff that was available for purchase at that time.
Mm-hmm. But
Now, I don't know about that. Like I said, I've seen a lot of pictures of the 1940s and stuff. I don't remember Bonnie and Clyde riding around with the jingo pants on or nothing.
no, no, it doesn't. It might be like it might have been at that time, but I'm pretty sure those things were probably more expensive than people were known to wear and known to buy. Number one, number two. Usually in that time, everybody was more like more proper, more like suit and ties, like everybody else is wearing right now. Um,
Hmm.
like even the kids weren't wearing things like that. Like they weren't
Yeah.
even like wearing jeans at that point in time.
And it's not like this is a young guy. He's probably in his 30s.
I'd probably say like maybe mid late 20s by the way he
Okay.
looks.
So, I mean, he's not like extremely young. I don't see a guy that was, from 1941 being in his late 20s, maybe early 30s, dressing like that.
No, no. Like the youngest guy that's in that photo is the one standing right by the car with the camera in his hand, and
Yeah, and
he's the
even that
youngest.
guy looks like he might be older than that guy.
Yeah.
So, I don't know. I mean, with 32 scientists testing the negative to this picture and
Hmm.
confirming it to be genuine, it's, well, I'm not a historian, so I don't know what clothing this guy has seen, but off of my firsthand experience, like not firsthand experience, but my firsthand view of it,
Hmm.
I would just say that doesn't fit. I don't see
No,
any of that clothing going to that time period.
no, no, not at all. Like it, like I said, as soon as I saw the photo, like as soon as you showed it to me before we went live, it's like he stuck right out because everybody else, like I said, everybody else is dressed like proper, suit and tie and everything. I understand it's like a huge public event. I mean, it's a ribbon cutting thing, but even then, in that time, you don't have people dressing like that in the 1940s. You don't. Like
My,
nobody was dressed like
yeah,
that.
the only question that raises into me during all this and looking at it is the fact that I'm like, what is so significant about this bridge in 1941, the opening of it,
I
that
don't
would make a time traveler want to stop and see this?
I don't know. Maybe it's one of his relatives were there. I mean, it could be anything really.
Like maybe he's standing there next to his grandma or something.
Yeah, or either that or one of his like his relatives are basically cutting the ribbon. Like who knows?
Yeah, I don't know, but that's the only thing that throws me off on it is that like I just don't see the significance. Like if somebody showed up to me and was like, "I could take you anywhere in time. Where would you want to go?"
Yeah, that would be the last
I
place you
I,
want to go.
I don't think 1941 bridge cutting ceremony is where I want to go.
No, no.
No,
Unless there
I
was supposed
just
to be something happening at that point in time. But
oh yeah. I mean, it just I don't know. I mean, if I had to go back and I had to pick one thing, I guess I would want to see
hmm,
like I guess the moment that the radios spoke out and said that World War II was over,
hmm,
like the V Day,
yeah,
not D Day, V Day, Victory Day, when the Allies had, the Germans have officially surrendered, Japan has officially surrendered,
yeah,
the war is over. I'd like to see the expression in all these men's faces that fought hard for that day.
yeah,
I'd like to see the look on their face to know that it was over.
yeah,
I think that'd be where I'd want to go.
yeah.
What about you? If you could travel one place, where would it go?
I honestly don't know. It's so hard because there's so many points in time that I would like to see. I really don't. I wouldn't be able to pick just one.
You want to go to Pompeii?
Oh yeah.
Well, you didn't say you had to stay.
No, I know that.
But yeah, I don't know. I mean, it's just like you said, just time being open like that.
Hmm.
I say now that I would that would be the day I'd want to see. But then you sit down and you think about it, and it's just there's so much you
Yeah.
could do.
So many
Like,
different
would you?
points. So many different points of time you can go to. Like see how the Sumerians were. See how civilization
Yeah,
basically
the
grew
Great
and
Wall being
flourished.
built.
Yeah. Like there's so many different points in time that I would love to go to and love to see.
See the
I can't pick
pyramids
one.
actually in use and why they made them that way.
Yeah, see
You
the
could solve the
actual
great
events.
mystery of the pyramids.
Yeah, see the actual events unfolding as they are basically happening. You know.
What happened to the Mayans?
Yeah.
Just things like that. You could, and then as all as cool as those things seem, and I know I've already said the Victory Day, but also it comes back. Do you also got to look at? Do you look at your own personal stuff too?
Mm-hmm.
Do you want to go back, like for me? Another one that I think would probably be the first one, taking the place of the V-Day one. I'd like to go back and see my grandpa again.
Yeah.
You know, I mean, that's the thing with time travel. It's all open.
Yeah. Yeah.
But the problem is with time travel too is I don't think you could use it so willy nilly like that.
Oh no, I mean it has adverse effects. You
Yeah,
know.
like you definitely don't want to. I think going back to see my grandfather would be something I would want to do, but I don't think it's something that I should do
You could see him
because
from a
when you
distance.
go back, yeah, when you go back to see somebody, you always run the chance that you could alter something by accident.
Right. Right.
Because like even say that like I stand back from a distance and watch,
Mm-hmm.
and all of a sudden I'm like, all right, well that's enough staring at my grandpa for now.
Yeah.
I could turn around to walk off, and a car swerves around me, goes around me, looks back at me, like, why'd that guy just step out in front of me?
Yeah.
And then that driver turns around, hits my grandpa, and kills him.
Yeah.
And then now I'm erased out of existence.
Right. Right. It'd be the grandfather paradox.
Yeah. So, it's one of those things like you just, if time travel ever becomes available,
Mm-hmm.
yeah, gotta tread carefully.
Oh yeah. Yeah. That's without a doubt.
Now, I think going to the future you should be able to do anything.
Well, the future wouldn't really affect anything.
Yeah, so if I went to the future and fucked around, I don't see what the problem would be.
No. No. There wouldn't be any problem going to the future. It's
Besides, I could
just
send Jean Claude Van Damme back after me.
the only thing is like you wouldn't be able to go to the like if you go to the past you have to tread carefully. The future wouldn't really affect anything unless you take knowledge from the future and bring it back to the past.
Yeah, that's true too. You could pull the Biff.
Mm-hmm.
But you would think though too, like they always have the saying that time has a way of correcting itself too. So if I even did try to go to the future, get something, and come back and make a fortune out of it,
Yeah.
would the thing happen to me like happened to Mr. Carlson, where like I got all this money and I think I'm going to get away with it and be this big billionaire in the future.
It depends on the
But in
event.
general, I get arrested and I'm just never heard from again. So it's like nothing ever happened.
Well, I mean, the thing is, though, it all depends on what you do. You know, like
Yeah.
now, if you bring back a piece of technology from the future that'll basically accelerate our civilization, obviously nothing bad's going to happen to you, but then the future's going to be altered.
Oh yeah, like okay, I see what you're kind of like if like I go into the future and there's this woman that's the leader of the world now and she's created world peace and everything's great,
Yeah,
and then I go back in time and I accidentally run her over.
yeah.
Now I've really fucked up the future.
Well, yeah, yeah. You just altered all the events, so now the future doesn't turn out to be the way it was.
Yeah. So then does that turn into a paradox or is it
In a sense,
just altered
yes.
time?
Well, I mean, if going by the scenario you just basically did, yeah, it creates a paradox because you basically just now eliminated the person that brought world peace.
Yeah, but does it? But is that a paradox or an altered timeline? Because wouldn't time correct itself and just make another timeline?
Mm,
See,
I
that's
don't
what I'm
know.
saying. Time travel's tricky, man.
Yeah, it's really tricky. Like,
Well, what is that thing that they keep saying? They call it the Back to the Future equation, where even time travel people have still been trying to figure out how the events of Back to the Future happened.
What?
Like they're like, okay, now Biff goes back to gets this, and then he comes back and gives it to his old self.
Right.
But by uh, Marty coming back and revealing to uh, younger Biff who he was, and then seeing Marty again in the future, he should have opened up a parallel timeline
Right.
because now he's interfered with the past and present and future of a single individual.
Right.
So time didn't play out how it should have.
Right.
And people say, okay, well, but Biff stealing the magazine is what originally altered it.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, see, that's when it just keeps going because then people are like, oh, well, no, Marty's buying the magazines, what originally did it. And then people are like, no, Doc inviting Marty into the see the time machines, what originally started it. And so it just keeps
It keeps on spiraling out and spiraling out.
yeah, spiraling out and spiraling out. And if you were to change one thing, it would all collapse.
Well, yeah, because you
So,
change one event, it basically changes everything in the future.
so it's just like no matter what you do, whether Biff was going was going to take that time machine or not, everything would have ended up in the exact way it ended, no matter what they done.
Mm.
That's kind of like the gist that I guess that movie tries to tell you.
Yeah. Like it was supposed to happen, regardless of what happened. It was supposed to happen.
Yeah, it's like kind of like those things where you see people, uh, like where you get an explanation for something and what you believe is a prophecy,
Mm-hmm.
and time rolls on and time goes by,
Right.
and then what